Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Family Sedan channel. Attorney James Murphy, who goes by the name Meta Lawman on Twitter, shared some of his latest insights on Twitter. And after what has happened with the SEC going after Binance and going after Coinbase, he said, quote, "Stakes just keep getting higher for ruling in SEC v. Ripple," end quote. So I'm going to share with you everything that he had to say in full context here. And I always appreciate what he has to say. And I'll tell you this, his follower count on Twitter has been increasing dramatically lately because he does have some very solid and thoughtful insight here. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a legal or financial background of any kind. I am not offering legal or financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. And so there's this tweet from Stuart Alderati this afternoon, who of course is Ripple's chief legal officer, their top in-house lawyer, and he said, "This week we saw the SEC bet on a strategy of shock and awe. My money remains all in on the rule of law." And look, I firmly agree. I know how stressful this has been for so many people throughout the space. It's not been a fun time having to deal with all this nonsense from Kim Jong-Gensler and the rest of those cartoons out there. But in the United States, at least, while there's no perfect judicial system, I'm telling you, typically what should be done ends up being done, or some sort of close approximation of that. And it seems very clear, as it pertains to secondary market transactions for any asset that exists, they're allowed. It's never the asset itself that is the security. I couldn't be more optimistic for the rule of law to play out in the favor of XRP holders. It's just going to take some time. But in the meantime, I appreciate all the attorneys within the space that have been providing insight, because I'm not an attorney. I know most of you out there listening aren't attorneys, although some of you are. And it's difficult to come to, for us non-attorneys, to come to our own conclusions without being fed sufficient information. And so as far as Attorney James Murphy, who I cited at the outset of the video, he's been getting a lot of attention on Twitter and social media, and including crypto media. In fact, there are two articles that I came across over there sharing his perspective. There was this one from the Crypto Basic titled "Top Legal Analyst Highlights How Ripple Case Will Influence Coinbase and Binance Lawsuits." And then there's this from Cointelegraph, "Ripple Case More Crucial Than Ever Amid Coinbase Binance SEC Crackdown. Lawyers." So let's go ahead and jump in here. Here's the latest from Meta Lawman, Attorney James Murphy. "The stakes just keep getting higher for the ruling in SEC v. Ripple, and here's why. If Judge Torres rules that XRP tokens trading on secondary markets are not securities, it would undermine the entire basis for the SEC's case against Coinbase and much of the Binance case. In the Coinbase case, the SEC claims that 13 tokens traded on Coinbase are securities. So Coinbase is illegally operating an unregistered securities exchange, broker-dealer, and clearing broker. But if those 13 tokens are judged not to be securities, the SEC has no case." Folks, this is a huge part of what it's going to come down to. But do you see what I was saying a minute ago, why I'm so optimistic for the future? It is never the asset themselves traded on secondary markets that constitute illegal securities transactions. I just don't see how the SEC's going to pull a fast one on anyone. So, I mean, if their mission were purely just to slow down adoption of crypto, I'd say, okay, good job, SEC, you're doing that, and you're awful for doing that. But if you think you're actually going to stop this thing by making BS nonsense arguments like this, which are incoherent and outside the rule of law, no, ain't going to work, you damn Muppets. Attorney Murphy continues, "Before anyone gets too excited, a ruling by Judge Torres would not be binding precedent in other cases, meaning other judges will not be bound to rule the same way. Only decisions of the courts of appeals and the Supreme Court are binding on lower court judges." Yeah, so I'll just pause a note there. That's true, and I've talked about this on this channel before, which is why I've said, if it comes to it, and Attorney Deaton, I know he's of the same mindset, should this thing get to the Supreme Court, if you look at the current makeup of the Supreme Court, just by and large, they are not in favor of government agencies engaging in government overreach. And Congress clearly has not provided this level of power to the SEC. So if it comes to it, and we have to wait another 3, 4, 5 years, however long it takes to get to that point, we're still going to have justice in the end. But my God, what percentage of our lives will have been wasted waiting for that? That's the sad part. So I don't think that's going to happen, but we'll see. And then there's also the question of, even if Ripple wins here, are we going to get held up in appeals? Well, let me circle back to that, but let's continue with Attorney Murphy's thoughts here. So again, he says only courts of appeals and the Supreme Court are binding on lower court judges. But here's what's interesting. The judge, that's Judge Reardon, assigned to the Coinbase case is brand new. Only been a judge for 6 months. Yeah, it's even got that new judge smell. It's mostly chemicals and glue. But I got that new judge smell here. Now, Judge Reardon works in the same court in Lower Manhattan with Judge Torres. Now, that I didn't know, and this is very interesting, so check this out. He says, so, while a Torres decision on XRP would not be a binding precedent, I do believe Judge Reardon will pay very close attention to Judge Torres' legal reasoning in ruling whether XRP is a security. And I believe Judge Reardon would follow that same reasoning as she analyzes whether the 13 tokens cited in the Coinbase complaint are securities. This dynamic, of course, works both ways. If Judge Torres rules that XRP tokens traded on secondary markets are securities, the SEC will jump for joy and argue that the judges presiding over the Coinbase and Binance cases should follow Judge Torres' reasoning. And again, look, I acknowledge that absolutely could happen, but I would just be flabbergasted. How could you not be? I mean, if you look at Judge Torres, all the hints that have been dropped, and the scorn against the SEC, including from Judge Netburn, so you recognize all that stuff, and then you look at how Judge Torres actually cares about secondary markets, as evidenced by the fact that she was willing to allow every single amicus brief that was applied for. And then obviously including Attorney John Deaton representing somewhere in the neighborhood of 76,000 XRP holders. Yes, I mean, technically you'd hope that any judge would do that, but this is a pretty clear sign that she's really taking seriously the impact for secondary markets. So how could she then look at all of that and somehow come to the illogical conclusion that the asset itself is a security and all this stuff with secondary markets? Nope, screw y'all and all of your business models, all of you developers around the world, you're doing it wrong. It's all security of Ripple. It's hard to believe that that's the conclusion she'd come to. I could believe that she'd come to a conclusion where Ripple technically had some sort of violation. That wouldn't particularly shock me. I've been saying that for a very long time now. Even though I don't know, I'm not making some huge prediction. I'm just saying that absolutely really would not surprise me. What would surprise me if there was some sort of ruling that XRP itself is a security, although I acknowledge it could happen. And so Attorney Murphy continues and he says, a few caveats are in order. Number one, the Binance case is not quite as simple because, unlike Coinbase, it did issue its own token, the BNB token. So Binance will be hoping Judge Torres rules that Ripple's own issuance and sales of XRP do not qualify as securities offerings. And, more caveats, number two, with respect to Coinbase, the SEC could still argue that staking as a service qualifies as a securities offering, even if Judge Reardon rules that the 13 listed tokens are not securities. But the rest of the SEC's case would be gutted. And so, folks, I mean, I hate to say it, but that's the most important part for we as, active participants in the world of crypto in any sort of capacity. I think most of us out here are holders, investors, whatever you want to call us. That's what we're looking for. And that would gut most of the SEC's case. It doesn't mean that I would agree with, if there was some sort of finding regarding the staking services. I'm not going to get into that in this particular video. But that would be a substantial win for us. And then Attorney Murphy continues and says, final caveat. Judges within the same court do disagree with one another occasionally. But I believe Judge Reardon, with only 6 months on the job, is not likely to disagree with the legal reasoning of how her experienced fellow judge in such an enormously consequential case. And that stands to reason to me. I mean, you never know, technically, and of course, Attorney Murphy's acknowledging that, but still saying, come on, brand new judge, like the most highly consequential case in crypto of all time, right here, right now. It's going to have global ramifications. What do you think? What do you think is going to happen there? And so then he says, bottom line, whichever way these early court rulings go, we should expect to see years of appeals. In the meantime, even more people, even more people in crypto have good reason to root for a big Ripple win. So it looks like the XRP army is finally getting some reinforcements. About damn time, right? So I appreciate the insight from Attorney Murphy here. Now, again, with him wrapping up the scene by stating that he thinks that whichever way the court goes, you're going to see years of appeals. He may very well be right. I hope not. I know that Attorney Hogan has publicly stated that he actually thinks that if Ripple wins, that the SEC would not appeal, with the bulk of his rationale just being, if the SEC appeals and then they lose to a higher court, that is binding, and so that just messes up. That's what Attorney Hogan had articulated. It would just mess up their entire strategy against crypto. So the question is, if you lose against Ripple, do you take that risk? And so I don't know. We'll see here. Somebody named XR Penn wrote to him and said, I heard elsewhere that if the SEC appeals an unfavorable ruling, they would be risking a binding ruling from appeals courts. Would that be worth their effort? And Attorney Murphy says, yes. An SEC appeal would be high stakes because it would likely create a binding precedent that all judges within the Second Circuit would have to follow. But the SEC typically does appeal adverse rulings on very important questions like this. So that's curious. So you have Attorney Murphy taking a different position than Attorney Hogan. I don't pretend to know, but I want the damn thing to be over. I just so badly want the damn thing to be over here. Then there was also this. Attorney Jesse Hines wrote to him and said, don't you feel that it's likely that the court will just rule on whether the sale of XRP was a security offering and pass on making a decision regarding secondary market sales and the digital asset itself? Because if I recall correctly, neither were pled in the cause of action. And so basically he's asking, is Judge Torres going to rule on anything where she wasn't really asked necessarily to even speak on it? Which a judge can do. And so Attorney Murphy says, yes, possible. I guess that would look like a library kind of outcome. Yeah, so if that happens, that would be really disappointing. That would mean that the judge looked at the 76,000 XRP holders represented by Deaton, all the amicus briefs, and said, okay, got it, but I'm not going to say anything about it effectively. God, I hope not. And that could happen. That would be really disappointing, because then there's still that uncertainty for XRP, and then I don't know what would happen, even including in terms of price action. I'd be concerned at that point if there's not that sort of clarity there. And that is basically what happened in the library case. I was talking about that just the other day. So, silver lining perhaps in the future if that happens. So in the library case, the judge, in the final ruling against library, didn't say anything about secondary market transactions of the LBC token, the library credit token, at that time. Now, in the remedies portion, and we're still technically waiting for the final written up ruling from the judge, but in the hearing on that topic for remedies in the library case in January of this year, the judge did indicate that pertaining to secondary market transactions, that's outside the scope of his ruling. That's powerful. So as long as we get it super duper, which means we could, in theory, get some bad news here if Judge Torres doesn't address this. It could be like a library case type of scenario, and maybe that does mean that the price of XRP starts tanking. That actually could happen. I'm not predicting that, but I just acknowledge that is a very real possibility. But even if that happens, when you get to the remedies portion here, she could pull a library. Judge Torres could do that, by which I mean she could then address secondary market transactions when there's pushback for the remedies portion. Now, I'd rather just get to, because she would know that that would be coming up. Dude, if I'm her, I'm just sitting here thinking, well, let's just knock this out right now by addressing this. That's what I'd prefer. That's probably what I would do, but I'm not a judge. I'm not an attorney. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. We'll see what happens, folks. But yeah, either way, regardless, this is not lost to me that the stakes just keep getting higher for the entire world of crypto. So what happens in the SEC v. Ripple case is of paramount importance. Everyone's paying attention. Even the XRP haters and even the Ripple haters. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the Moon Family Sedan.